Welcome to the Underground, the Steel City Underground, the black and gold standard for Pittsburgh Steelers coverage. Now, here's your host, Joe Kuzma and Brian E. Roach.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Steel City Underground podcast. My name is Joe Kuzma, and joining me here, my good colleague and pal of one, Mr. Brian E. Roach. Brian, you know, we had a lot going on last week through the weekend. We're finally back around to look at the Steelers draft. But before we do that, gotta ask, how you doing, my friend?
So let me ask you a question. Have you ever tried to shave or trim in a camera?
No, but I'm trimming you off right now.
It's very disturbing because unless your camera can do mirror image, it's impossible. So I almost cut this whole thing off because I was trying to clean myself because, you know, I want to look pretty for the people. I had to trim up some of my gray shaggy beard, leaving, you know, the goatee, of course. But it was difficult. So I had to actually join a Zoom meeting so that I could mirror my camera so that I could actually do it.
Oh, there you go. There you go. Well,
where there's a will, there's a way. And by the way, who's your Huckleberry? I'm your Huckleberry.
Huckleberry Cobbler. What a great movie. And Val Kilmer just recently passing too, man. Just, you know, and we all reach there someday. Father time is undefeated, unfortunately.
Comes for us all.
Yep, comes for us all in different ways. Or there's just, you know, unforeseen circumstances. Not the way you want to open a show, but Ryan Watts, last year's 6th-round pick, safety, defensive back. I was counting on him, and maybe the Steelers knew a little more with the medicals and what was going to happen. And he's been released, recommended to not play contact sports again. Particularly football. So that's rather unfortunate. You know, our thoughts certainly go out to him and his family and friends and everyone surrounding that, because it's like you go from highs and lows too. And we were saying that about Derek Harman just the other day as well. So we're in this period where, you know, we now know the entire Steelers draft class too, and we kind of get an inkling as to what their process may have been. And I know there's some people that are still kind of holding on to this, maybe, I believe, far-fetched notion of they didn't know what they were going to do. And that just goes from the Mel Kipers of the world, who felt Shedeur Sanders was like the 5th best player in the entire draft. And not to talk too much about Sanders, but it is funny, since we last met, that the Browns swung back around and then picked him, which totally, you see everybody that's in the booth there in Cleveland, and they're like, you know, it's like this little, like, not even a golf clap, like, they're doing the jazz hands thing, or like the audio sensory kind of. They were not necessarily. It looked like Jimmy Haslam was like, take that guy or something. You know, they had some type of pressure because they'd already taken Dylan Gabriel, and what a not the wide receiver room. Although they got Deontay Johnson now too, so the wide receiver room in Cleveland. But wow, I mean, we talked about whether or not were the Steelers like screwing up the quarterback position. Were they? I mean, this is like they're just throwing everything out there and seeing what kind of sticks in Cleveland. And I'd at least say, well, Omar Khan's not doing that. I think they have a plan, and whether that plan still involves Mr. Rogers or whatever, we'll get to that in a little bit. But I like it better than maybe Kenny Pickett now, who didn't want to compete last year. Now has 2 rookies coming in with him, and Joe Flacco in there, and who knows what Deshaun Watson's still doing.
And they're not taking his 5th-year option.
Nope. So hey, that's rough. But we were talking about how this class was a lot like Pickett's class. I think the Steelers did learn their lesson from before. And you just saw, I mean, where did Shedeur end up going? Like 125 or something like that. I'll find it. But that's how many times teams passed. And teams were looking at, I mean, Browns went got Dylan Gabriel over him. Kyle McCord went to the Eagles. And, you know, it was right in that area where we talked about the Steelers may be interested in McCord or Howard. And we saw how that ended up. But let's start at the very top, because instead of going quarterback and taking that extreme reach, you have Derek Harman coming in, and this is a guy that could play all along the line. Looks like a potential fit to be the heir to soon-to-be 36-year-old Cameron Hayward. Still an elite player, but again, Father Time will eventually catch up to you, and somebody's got to be there to replace you. So, Father Time being undefeated, I think that I think this was the better fit for the Steelers, because a lot of folks were just looking at quarterback. I look at like what Mike Tomlin has gotten out of guys, like a first year playing Mason Rudolph in 2019 with a bunch of no names basically on the offense, while Juju and James Conner were hurt. Deontay was a rookie, and even he was bleeding out of his ear, if you remember. That was a thing too. It was just a comedy of errors that season, and he's throwing to Nick Vannett and Johnny Holton and all that, but he squeezed something out of Duck Hodges too. And he's always gotten something out of his players, be it a Landry Jones or be it even Trubisky. Trubisky's probably the worst of the lot by far, but
oh god,
Kenny Pickett and missing someone in here. Oh yeah, Justin Fields and Russell Wilson, of course. And they still are a playoff team, and I know they didn't. Well, Joe, Brian, they still haven't won a playoff game, but it's like they're still there. They're like a piece or a part away. But the main problem last year was they couldn't stop the opposing offenses, even with a lot of the defense, even the defensive depth that was supposed to step in and play and couldn't. You've got to play Derrick Henry at least twice a year. Last year, they had to play him 3 times. Derrick Harman is a pick to help stop the Derrick Henrys of the world and the plethora of running backs the Browns are putting on their roster.
Absolutely. Look, this is what I'm going to say about Shedeur Sanders, right? Do I think that better quarterbacks, that he was better than some of the quarterbacks drafted before him? Probably. Do I think that he should have been a first-round pick? No, I think I've been pretty clear about that. I didn't think any of them, including Cam Ward, were necessarily first-round graded picks. I think that if Shedeur Sanders had been there when the Steelers picked and took Will Howard, there was equally as a chance that they would have taken it. But that's where they were going to target it, late in the draft, right? And I will just say this. Look, if half the statements about his interviews are true, that's going to throw any NFL franchise off if you are a rookie. And it has nothing to do with cockiness. It has nothing to do with pride. It has nothing to do with confidence. It has to do with, this is a team sport, and you cannot come in and dictate this is how it's going to go, right? They want people who are going to contribute to the program, not be a distraction from the program. So I can understand why maybe his draft stock tanked a little bit. I don't think it has anything to do with half the stuff that people are talking about. I think it has to do with how he worked with those franchises, and quite honestly, simply the fact that this is not a great talented draft class. And without the number 2 pick, what's his name, Hunter? Is that right? Am I getting it right, Hunter?
Yeah, Travis Hunter.
I don't know that we're having a Shedeur Sanders conversation. You go back and look at his tape. It's not that the throws are god awful. It's not that he can't get the ball down there, but look at how many times Hunter makes up for the mistakes in ball placement that Sanders had. It's a lot. So I just am not convinced that he didn't go exactly where he needed to go. Now, that being said, I actually feel a little bad for the kid. He's in that draft. He may never hit the field. He has to outperform Dylan Gabriel, drafted ahead of him, higher draft capital. He has to outperform Kenny Pickett. May not be that hard. Has to outperform Joe Flacco. Also may not be that hard. But, when you're 4th probably on the, the pecking post there, when you're 4th on the board, you're not getting a ton of opportunity, right? He really has to shine, or he's going to just fade. So I feel bad. I don't feel like this was the best place for him to end up.
No, that's a mess of a situation. If they hadn't taken Gabriel, it's the same thing as here with
then I might have changed my tune. They don't take Gabriel a round before they take him.
4th round, yeah.
Then maybe it's a good opportunity. But right now, I feel like he's in potentially the worst position for his potential success. And again, let me be clear. He's on the Browns. I can't really hope he's successful. But for the most part, I hope all these kids are successful and have a nice career and a long-lasting career. I just think it's unfortunate that's where he ended up.
Well, take a look at who was the Steelers' 4th quarterback last year going into camp. Do you remember? I do. It took me a second as I was thinking of asking you the question. John Reese Plumlee out of Central
There you
Florida.
go.
Remember the
Yeah, I remember that guy.
multi-sport star, and he actually had to return kicks and stuff to try and get a shot at making even the practice squad. And at least with Shedeur, he doesn't have the first round hype, but I mean, he has the name on the back of the jersey. And I think if his name was anything else, Johnson, Williams, Smith, anything, Jones, something just generic and not tied to Coach Prime, there's a lot of stuff with that. There's people who are talking about daddy ball. His dad was the coach. Even, Jackson State, Division II, jumps up. Does he start? Does he get recruited? Does he play? There's a lot of those question marks that were going into it. And maybe that elevated his presence. And even in our minds, there's a lot of lies that are told this time of year. But there's a few,
oh my God,
there's a lot of there's a lot of truths too. Everybody knew. They were like, oh, we're gonna dangle this carrot and see if we can get some sucker, and then we could take this, and then we'll take somebody else like a Jalen Milroe or something. And nobody was taking it because he didn't perform at the combine. He didn't perform at any pro days. He didn't want to take certain interviews. It was like a very shut door, very overconfident. You know what I mean? And it was just that kind of shuts the door on what I want to say about Shedeur entirely. He turns out to have any kind of pro career, great. But maybe somebody else kicks the tires on him if he doesn't make Cleveland's team. But somebody had said that too. They said, well, the Browns are taking Sanders and then they could use him as trade bait. And it was the same thing I said about Joe Milton with the Patriots. And they were like, oh, they're going to develop him. And I'm like, the whole coaching staff is gone after a year. What'd you get for Joe Milton? What are you going to get for Shedeur Sanders when he's, taken in the 5th round and nobody wanted him after 150 picks to begin with? I don't think there's a whole lot there. He was picked 144 overall. It was very close to, middle of the 5th round. So
yeah, I'm happy to eat my words if he turns into the next coming. I just don't see it. And I don't see it from looking at his tape either. Look, I get everybody out there is like, oh, watch the games. I watched every game and he's amazing. No, he's not. It's just not. All right. And I do think he's got the potential to have a career in the NFL. Probably the same one that most 5th round or 4th round or 3rd round quarterbacks have as a backup. I just don't see him as a franchise quarterback.
Yeah, and that's going to just jump us straight to, we have talked about Harman quite a bit. We'll come back to him and also Caleb Johnson, who we spoke of on the last show. Steelers, only 2 top 100 picks. We'll come back to YA Black too, because we're on the quarterbacks, and you make a lot of decent points here about Art Rooney II comes out and says anybody taken from this point is probably going to be a sit for a year, and that's probably the best thing that Will Howard can do. Now, who's he sitting behind? Is he sitting behind Mason Rudolph, or Rooney's expecting Aaron Rodgers? And at this point, I was listening to the XM radio. I think this morning it was Ed McCaffrey. And the media people are like, oh, well, Kirk Cousins. And, there's maybe a report or there's just speculation. And I don't think that the Steelers are the team to speculate about Kirk Cousins because they played him last year and they saw how limited he was. Now, whether or not that was still recovering from an Achilles or whatever, they're saying, oh, well, maybe some of his mechanics were off and he's still recovering. But Atlanta's full go with a guy that they're paying obscene amount of money to have him as a backup. They're full go with Michael Penix. So that's got to tell you something too, unless it's just a bad or dumb coaching staff. I don't see Kirk Cousins being any kind of, I'll put it this way, Brian, would you rather trade for Kirk Cousins and pay, Atlanta wants at least 20 million of his contract covered, or would you take a year of Aaron Rodgers saying he would play for 10 million at age 41 going on 42?
Let me put it this way. One of the things that I thought was the most insightful thing said by any talking head during the draft was, we are making all kinds of speculations about Kirk Cousins, and he just may end up being the backup quarterback in Atlanta, and we could all be wrong. Because that's what I think is going to happen, right? I don't think anybody's going to take on that amount of contract for a player that is obviously on the decline. Would I rather have Aaron Rodgers than Kirk Cousins? I don't know that I have a vomit bucket handy,
I thought you were looking for the sarcasm sign again.
I could do that too. There you go.
It is.
Would I rather have? Of course I would rather have. No, I don't want either one of them. I want to roll with Mason. Okay. If Aaron Rodgers comes, look, if he's willing to actually come and be a participant and follow the path of past Steelers and pass on some knowledge, maybe he's finally going to get it in his head, hey, this is the end. I should try and have some kind of a legacy with somebody else, and he can teach Will Howard a thing or two. Great. But, yeah, I'd rather he wasn't here.
I'm with you on that one. I was just kind of curious. I'm definitely not trading for Kirk Cousins. I don't care how many picks the Steelers have next year. I don't care if it's a 6th or a 7th. I mean, that's what they already did for Justin Fields. Justin Fields, for me, at least had some maybes about like, hey, his ceiling could be here. He could be coached up. He could do. And then you saw him play, and it was like, well, it's pretty much the same thing as Chicago, and this isn't, there's no upward trends here, and there's still people that are, they should have re-signed Justin Fields. What's this team doing? And, they finally would pick 185 in the 6th round. I thought it was like kind of, I want to say a masterclass of drafting. I think Omar Khan, and I think there's something that we continue to overlook basically from last year. We haven't had a chance to talk about how many players from last year's class are going to get to play this year that didn't last year. You have Troy Fautanu, for example. You have Roman Wilson still. You have Logan Lee on the defensive line. So you've got some fresh blood coming in as almost like draft picks with that. You took your 2nd rounder and you got DK Metcalf, who's head and shoulders above anybody that you were going to get in the 2nd round or probably in the entire draft period.
In the entire draft, yeah.
At wide receiver. You did not move from George Pickens, which there was smoke around the fire. And really, there wasn't a whole lot of trading. Who's to say that still might not happen? But you had Jalen Ramsey up for grabs. You have Trey Hendrickson complaining about his contract in Cincinnati. There's a few others. I think there's Jair Alexander's another corner that's looking. Dallas Goedert was thought to maybe be on the market. So there's a lot of players that were thought to be on the market, and it was very quiet. The movement wasn't really there. Aside from Jacksonville, that was the big swing along with the Giants, but the Giants going after Jackson Dart, and I think Pro Football Focus, for example, had Jackson Dart as like their 6th or 7th quarterback. He was way below. Okay, he was below Riley Leonard, Will Howard, Jalen Milroe, Shedeur, and then Cam Ward. So he was the 6th guy down on that list. And actually having, they have Will Howard as the 4th guy, but then again, they have him on the big board as 122. And the Steelers ended up grabbing him at 185. And there's people that, there's criticism about this. And let's talk about Will Howard for a second, because we were talking about Shedeur and having Travis Hunter, a team that went 9-4. We're talking about Will Howard, who just won a national title with Ohio State. And everybody's saying, well, what did he do, when he was over at Kansas State for a few years? And he still showed enough, but this was something, I think if Will Howard plays maybe 2 seasons at Ohio State and he puts up more tape, how's that any different than Joe Burrow throwing the guys like Justin Jefferson or Jamar Chase while he's there? I know he threw 60 touchdowns, okay? But Clyde Edwards-Helaire as their running back at LSU too. Will Howard, though, he might jump. He could jump in. Maybe he's been with guys that are top pro level people. He had Chip Kelly as an OC. He had Travion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins. He had Jeremiah Smith. He had Emeka Ibuka. He got a lot of weapons that were there and did very well with what he had. Won the first expanded college football playoff. He's 6'4", 236, a guy that doesn't take a lot of sacks, doesn't turn the ball over a whole lot. I'm not going to say he's a finished product. I don't know what his arm strength looks like in the pros or his anticipation or timing, but at the same time, it's a guy you got with like pick 164 or whatever. Like it's, we're not holding this 185. I'm sorry. 164 was black. So yeah, I mean, I don't think you could go wrong here. And I think we were correct in our assessment that McCord or Howard were always going to be the target. McCord going a few picks earlier to the Eagles, left Howard for the Steelers.
Yeah, I'm going to say this. We talked about, did the Steelers have a plan for the draft? They absolutely had a plan for the draft, and they executed that plan. As much as I belittle most of the talking heads, and I will and continue to do so, they all think this was the 4th best draft of any group in the draft, right? They're ranking the Steelers universally as a great draft class. And And while I hate agreeing with them, I actually think they did a really nice job, right? I think they got the D-line addressed in 2 places, right? They've got that prototypical Casey Hampton-like nose tackle that everybody's been crying about. And whether that's what he plays or not, that's the body type that he has, right? The guy's going to eat up blocks, and he's going to free up space.
Y.A. Black out of Iowa, by the way.
Yeah,
the pick before.
Yeah, Y.A. Black. And you've got, the running back who has Le'Veon Bell type characteristics. Is he Le'Veon Bell? Probably not. I mean, that's, it's hard. That's hard praise to give anybody initially. And there's certain parts of that we don't want him to be Le'Veon Bell in round 2, right? We don't want him to do the stuff at the end. But, it is, a solid running back, 2 solid defensive line picks. The quarterback, look, I will say this. I've seen people reposting John Gruden's quarterback cap. Joe, Will Howard is the greatest quarterback. I got some guys out there comparing him to Josh Allen. I'm like, slow your roll a little bit. All right? We watched Will Howard every game under the microscope, right? Because we're Buckeye fans. We watched every game of that Will Howard played. And he's not Josh Allen.
No,
right?
no. That's pretty high praise.
He's not the greatest quarterback since sliced bread. Somebody posted a picture of like one of those like eyeglass things, and they had a picture of, Will and then Ben. He ain't Ben. All right. Do I think he has potential? Sure. Could he turn into something? Sure. He could also just be a guy who's a backup quarterback for the rest of his life. It depends on how he develops. And do I know the answers to that? No, nobody else does either. Look, we talked about 18% of quarterbacks drafted in the top 10 are success. 18%. Nobody knows how to evaluate quarterbacks. You don't know what you've got. It all depends on a variety of things, the things surrounding them, the system that they're in. Who knows? Right? It's a crapshoot with quarterbacks, and it's not even as good of odds as a crapshoot. So let's see what he does. I think he's going to have an opportunity, but slow your roll in assuming he's the second coming, because we don't know that yet.
He's got Big Ben's size. He doesn't have Big Ben pedigree. And even Big Ben, a lot of people said, this is a MAC guy. This is a guy coming out of Miami University in Ohio, not the one in Florida. That's not the one that's known to produce a lot of NFL caliber players, let alone a Hall of Famer or a franchise quarterback. Howard's got he's got some intangibles to work with. I like the unknown. I do. I'd rather the devil I don't know than the devil I know. Justin Fields was the one I knew. Will Howard's the one I don't. And even to this extent, me being a stan a lot of times for Mason Rudolph, a year away, did it do him good? Did he learn some things from Brian Callahan while he was down in Tennessee? What was that experience like playing with a very bad football team? I mean, he did have Calvin Ridley and Hopkins for a minute down there, but aside from that, does he come back to Arthur Smith, and is he capable? He had a hodgepodge set of offensive coordinators. He had dealt with Randy Fichtner and having no quarterback coach. He dealt with Matt Canada. Wanted to give a little bit of benefit of the doubt. He's seen a thing or two, but at the same time, so is Will Howard. What do you think? What are these teams do you think that he's playing against versus, Shedeur, for example? I mean, Howard literally is playing against all these guys that were getting picked over the weekend, at every level of the college football playoff. So that says something. But usually when you're down in this level of the draft, there's not a lot of expectation. It's not a throwaway pick. And I got to jump over. We're jumping around. But we got to go to his teammate with the Buckeyes, Jack Sawyer, Captain Jack.
We do.
And look, people they're saying that's a throwaway. Yeah, and I don't think that's a throwaway.
One more thing about Will Howard first.
Yeah, sure thing.
The one thing you can say about him and about Jack Sawyer, they're winners, right? Forget the Michigan game. I blame that on Ryan Day. They're winners for the most part. He won when he was at Kansas State. He wins a national championship in Ohio State, right? The Big 12 or whatever championship they won at Kansas State. And so the kid's a winner. He's got the right moxie. He's got the right attitude. Let's give him the shot. All right, now we can move on to Captain Jack. One of the greatest things about Jack Sawyer is that Will Howard said, if there's one guy on the team I would bring with me, it's Jack Sawyer.
Yeah, I was looking for my Jack Sawyer picture. He's, if you don't know, as far as moxie and being a teammate, when Michigan went to plant the flag in the middle of the field at Ohio Stadium, he was part of he was part of that. So if you got somebody that's going to wipe their cleats with a terrible towel, that's the guy you want covering your back. But how many times have we talked about where TJ Watt or Alex Highsmith gets hurt? And over the years, Nick Herbig was a find. I think Jack Sawyer could be a very similar find middle round where people are overlooking him, shorter arms, or maybe the 40 time isn't exactly, they didn't stop the stopwatch exactly where they would have liked it. But the intangibles to play against the run, the intangibles to rush the quarterback, those are all there. He will probably be a special teams player primarily for the first year. I don't know that he'd be an inactive, but let's put that up against grabbing guys that are 32 years old, like a Melvin Ingram or a Marcus Golden, or trading for a Malik Reed. None of those have worked out. The older veteran pass rushers have not worked out when there's a need on the field to either for substitution or injury, just to give somebody a breather. It's not worked out, and it gets exploited when you have to put those guys out there. And this is TJ Watt turning 30. That's far from him not being in his prime. His best years are now. But you also want to make sure that he can last a 17-game season, because when you don't have him, things tend to turn south. So also looking toward the future, I don't know what Alex Highsmith's year looks like this year. Last year was a bit of a down year. I won't call it a full disappointment, but it was underwhelming compared to his first several years and prior to landing the big contract. Now he's got that big contract and we're in it beyond this year. If he has another season like last, you're starting to look at Herbig's contract coming up, and you now might have your eyes already set on the next guy in Sawyer to fill into that rotation to have a little bit of youth and an influx. So I had no problem. In fact, when I saw Lathan Ransom go and I saw Cody Simon go, both Ohio State players on the defense right before the Jack Sawyer pick, and my mind was immediately going. I was like, "Ooh, Simon! Ooh, he was there. That would have been a nice pick." I'm like, "Do you necessarily need it?" They have Malik Harrison and all the other inside linebackers, Cole Holcomb coming back, but Lathan Ransom, I was starting to think, okay, what did the Steelers have? They signed Juan Thornhill, so they've got a veteran utility type safety that's there. So this fits in with everything. You add Y.A. Black from Iowa, all Big Ten. Like this is like all Big Ten Steelers weather. Some hosses here. Derek Harman Derek Harman, Wyatt Black, Jack Sawyer. This all fits in. You get Logan Lee back, another Hawkeye, another Iowa product. You bring all of these guys back in, and Montravius Adams got released, so that's another sign there. You've got Loudermilk back. You put that with Benton, you put that with Hayward, you got Highsmith and Watt. Those are your starters. You got the other guys behind it. It's starting to look like a very deep defense on every level that you're going to need to be able to stop Derrick Henry, to stop the Patrick Mahomes guys of the world, the Saquon Barkleys, all that you're going to have to face in order to win a playoff game or end up being a contender. As long as you have a quarterback who's a game manager and doesn't turn the ball over, Howard doesn't really fit that description. I don't think Rudolph fits that description. I don't think Aaron Rodgers will fit that description. Kirk Cousins, on the other hand, I don't know. So defensively, I'm missing somebody too. Where are we at further down in the draft? Dante Kent, Central Michigan, maybe a nickel corner prospect at 229. Maybe it means they're not totally sold on Beanie Bishop. Maybe they're just adding another body. Maybe he'll be a practice squad type guy. They're taking a flyer on it. It's an extra pick from the one before it was Carson Bruner, also linebacker. I guess I got to remember this isn't the tight end Bruner. This is Mark's kid though, from being the first round pick of the Steelers like about 30 years ago. But yet another player that, they're bottom of the roster guys that can fill out, help with special teams. Maybe they amount to something, maybe they don't. But it's all very focused on their plans to make sure they have the best defense they could field with no holes, no leaks, no weakest link, anything like that. And I thought they did a very solid job with the entirety of the draft in doing that. And then also where they went at quarterback. And, of course, like you said, the running back out of Iowa, Caleb Johnson. I don't see a whole lot of I don't see where they could have done anything differently. The only oddity is you've got two wide receivers that are on expiring contracts this year, Pickens and Calvin Austin. Usually they get ahead of that, but not this year, not this draft class. And I know I'm long-winded here, but they added Robert Woods, 32 years old, maybe a little off injured, but he's a guy that can also contribute on special teams. He could be a returner. And if it's somebody you have that's a veteran presence that's a little deeper on the bench, I'm all for it. He's always been a solid player everywhere he's gone. He's just had trouble staying on the field. So this whole approach by Omar Khan and the Steelers front office, like you said, everyone's giving him pretty high praise. Not being a homer here. I thought this was, aside from where the talking heads had him trying to land some quarterback where they probably shouldn't, I thought they did a fantastic job.
Remember what I said at the beginning of this. Play this safe, right? Build the team. Don't take big swings at risky prospects. And that's exactly what they did. They built the core of their team by doing the things that they planned to do all along, right? You know, the scuttlebutt is that it was one of the three, Nolan, Grant, or Harman. Nolan and Grant were gone. And with Harman still there, it was easy for them. You know, they described him as a player they're not trading away from. So, you know, maybe they had the opportunity to trade back, but they were worried Harman wouldn't be there if they did. And they're like, forget it. We're not going to do it. Not trading away from a player means that's a player you had targeted already. You know, the same thing I think is true of Johnson. I don't think they thought he'd be there in the third round, right? It was a deep running back class. Some of those running backs went much earlier than I thought they would. You know, and nonetheless, they get a guy that was ranked great value in the third round. I love the Y.A. Black pick. I thought this overall was a very good draft, and we'll see what Will Howard can contribute as he's given time to develop a little bit. You know, let's not try and rush him into the starting lineup though. He needs a little seasoning.
Yeah, I'm with you too. You got Jaylen Warren for that. You got Jaylen Warren for the pass pro. We talked about that. Yep. And Jaylen Warren, I don't know, the most durable. I know I was getting into some debates about, you know, Kenneth Gainwell's maybe presence on the roster, whether or not he'll be there. He's another guy that could be a returner. You're not going to want Warren returning anything now that he's going to be a presumed at least 1A, maybe with a 1B with Johnson. I think Johnson could hop in here very soon and maybe be the 1A. And will he take all of Najee's workload? No, because Najee was starting to slip and lose some workload to Jaylen Warren to begin with. The only other concern I have, I mean, nickel corner still could be concerning. You might be a Beanie believer. Maybe Dante Kent flashes and shows you something. The Steelers seem to just be adverse to working on that position. Is Mike Hilton still floating around in free agency too? Although he ran his mouth enough. He might still be out there. I don't know, but I'm just saying, like, maybe they look for free agent at some point. Offensive line depth, because I'm not even sure the offensive line starters. I don't know if they have it fixed yet. I mean, Frazier, yeah. Seumalo, okay. Batano's a complete question mark. McCormick had struggled in certain portions last year. He was better against the pass than he was with the run. That's kind of an oddity. It's usually the other way around, right? Broderick Jones has not played as a left tackle.
Yep.
And everybody.
There's a lot of questions.
Yeah. You got like Max Sharping and I think Kelvin Anderson or something like that. Somebody like that that's, you know, was like practice squad or bottom of the roster inactive types that are your primary backup options. And that's a little bit concerning to me. But then again, would you have went defensive tackle? You're not going to go offensive tackle again for a third year in a row. They'll just be sitting on the bench. You're not going to go that high in the first round. You're probably not going to go third round either. So we'll see. I thought maybe a guard might get tucked away here at some point, but you're talking seventh round. You're talking about guys that may have been going undrafted if the team didn't already kind of have their name on the board somewhere, right?
Yeah, I'll tell you, this is the best thing. One of the best things I like about this draft is you already had the pieces in place you thought for the offensive line, right? You're hoping Broderick Jones is the left tackle you need. You're hoping Troy Fautanu is the right tackle you need. You're pretty comfortable with Seumalo, and you're comfortable with Frazier. Yeah, you got a question mark at guard. But, you know, you feel like you have the pieces. The best thing about what they're going to do is, like I said, I still look at next season as we're not going to win the Super Bowl next season. And that's fine, right? But what they are going to be able to do is know, do we still have work to do on this offensive line? And when we have all these draft picks, we're going to have the opportunity to do that, right? They're going to get to know what they have. Is Broderick Jones a guy that's going to be able to take that position, or are we going to look at that as a busted pick, right? Is Troy Fontenot going to be the guy at right? We'll see. Does Zach Frazier continue to progress and do better as a center in his second season? They have the opportunity to fix it now if it's broken still, because they weren't going to fix everything in this draft. Just wasn't possible. They didn't have enough picks. They had less picks than they normally do. They weren't fixing everything. They did fix a lot of the biggest glaring holes, minus quarterback. And maybe that's fixed too. You just don't know. And I just don't think it is for long term. I'm happy with where they ended up at the end of this draft. I think they are a more solidified roster than they were last year in some of those positions. And I'm quite content with assuming we will have a pick somewhere in the middle of the first round.
That's very possible. I mean, everyone's really hedging their bets on everything from Arch Manning, who made it, and I don't even think he might come out for next year, to Aller from Penn State and all these other quarterbacks, and you just never know how anybody's going to turn out. You never know. That's just the way it is. I don't know how Sanders is going to turn out. I don't know how Howard's going to turn out. And did they get opportunity? If Drew Bledsoe doesn't get hurt, does Tom Brady ever get on the field? And do you ever know that he's capable of doing, having the legendary career he ended up having? Vomit a little bit in my mouth saying that, but you got to give him his flowers where they're due. So we'll be talking more about this into the future, Brian. So.
I mean, you've heard me say next year's quarterback class looks better than this year's quarterback.
Oh, of course it does.
It does, but we might get to next year's quarterback class and go, vomit, it ends up looking terrible, because maybe they all stink next year, right? You just don't know. We're basing that on projection when we say stuff like that, and so is everybody else. Until you get another season of these guys and you look at who does a great job, who does a bad job, who progresses, who regresses, you don't know what it's going to look like. It could be just as bad or worse than this year. Maybe there's only one guy. Maybe it's not even Arch Manning, right? Maybe it's somebody else. We don't know what Arch Manning is yet. The only thing we know is he's got that name.
There it is. And it's the name. It's the same reason everyone's hyping Ham up. Thank you for saying that, because it's been on my brain. I'm like, everybody's hyping up Shedeur Sanders because of Coach Prime, his dad. Everybody's doing the same thing about the Manning legacy too. It's the same exact thing. We don't know. And look at Quinn Ewers. There started to be a little.
That guy, man, he got hosed.
There was chatter about, the previous year he was going to be one of the top prospects coming into this draft. The same way we're talking about it now is the way we were looking at yours maybe over a year ago. The same exact way. So you don't know how it's going to turn out. You've got players, for years you have players that win the Heisman that aren't great pros. And that's not just at the quarterback position, although that's usually the one that wins the Heisman more frequently than not. But, Reggie Bush had a pretty pedestrian, NFL career. He bounced around a lot, and it's not to say that he was a complete bum or anything like that, but he didn't come out, and he wasn't Emmitt Smith or Barry Sanders or Walter Payton or anybody like that either. So, but in college he was, you know what I mean? So you just never know. You just never know. And there's many others that are like that over the years. You go back to even Peyton Manning or Ryan Leaf, and it's like, ooh, that is it's only forever linked because of 1 and 2, but Marcus Mariota, Jameis Winston, all of that. So
and how did either one of them really turn out?
Yeah. I mean, all the way around. So I'll do it for us right now, folks. We don't ever apply grades to the draft. It's just somebody asked me, what's your draft grade? And I'm like, A++++. Like gold, bunch of gold stars, 100%, 101%. I don't know. I won't know for 3 or 4 years probably. And you look back on it, like you look back at the draft with, Najee and whatnot. You had Dan Moore, you had Kendrick Green and that. And the last man standing from that's Pat Freiermuth. It's a 4-year cycle. So we'd be looking back at that Kenny Pickett draft and all the players that come along with some of that, and you're like, oh, okay, well, that was an A, that was a B. Give it an A now. My fantasy draft last year, I got like a D+. I'm sitting there like, how could I have a D plus? I had like Josh Jacobs, I had Derrick Henry as my running backs. I ended up getting Joe Burrow in like the 9th round. I ended up with I had T Higgins. Dude, I smoked everybody. I think I lost 2 games and I won the fantasy championship. And I went back and I pulled that up and I was like, D plus, huh? Yeah, Yahoo Fantasy, I'll show you. And that's the way these things turn out. So, anyways,
I have no.
I know you just pick all Steelers in your fantasy draft, and I wonder why you don't win sometimes.
I don't do that play. Either. That's why I don't pick anybody. I don't do any of it.
He doesn't even update his roster for the week. You got like Steelers are on a bye, and just everybody's still in there. So
like whatever, don't care.
Yep. All right, folks. Well, that'll do it for us right now with our little post-draft review, and that's why I say it for a grade. I mean, I'm never too high on giving anything more than a B. Like, I don't know if something's an A, I don't know if something's a C, and I'm not going to say, oh, this is absolutely terrible. They ignored every need every way around. It doesn't all fit like, perfectly like that square hole, square peg type thing. And sometimes it's the round hole with the square peg. So we'll find out.
I'll give it an A simply because it's the way I wanted it to go. Right?
You got
everything I wanted to happen happened. Right?
Derek.
I wanted. Minus, like, I didn't want them to draft Jack Sawyer, right? I didn't want that, but I'm not against it, right? But I wanted a running back. I wanted double dipping at the D line. I basically got my whole wish list, so I'm giving him an A. The hell with it.
And I wanted Howard. I had Harman and Howard, and I had Henderson. I had 3 H's all there with their last names. But Henderson, it was just a real. I was really wishing and praying and hoping because I didn't really truly believe he was going to fall into the 3rd round, but I was like, well, maybe a few of these other running backs somebody will take instead. And that happened, I mean, with Caleb Johnson, because I didn't see RJ Harvey going ahead of him, and well, there we are. So you never can tell. But that'll do it for us for this show, folks. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Till next time. Thank you for supporting Steel City Underground. We're going to be getting into a little bit slower of the off-season period. We'll see if we get some extra news. We'll look at how all these picks work. We'll kind of give a review of maybe both sides of the ball, a depth chart, something like that. So stay tuned here with us. And once again, thank you for watching or listening wherever you might be. My name is Joe, and his name is Brian. Till next time, we encourage everyone out there to be safe, be good. Catch you later.
We would like to thank you for listening and remind our listeners to follow us on social media and our website, www.steelcityunderground.com.